Shall we say his name?
Daemon Targaryen.
If anyone ever provoked thought and conversation, it would be Daemon Targaryen. There are a lot of mixed views on this character. Some people love him, some people hate him, others love to hate him and hate to love him. Daemon is described as the wonder and terror of his time. He's a true gray character, and George R. R. Martin's favorite Targaryen. He's chaos incarnate, volatile and impulsive. His actions sometimes really seem to have rhyme or reason. Often it seems like he just does things because he can. And who's gonna stop him? As always, spoilers beware, and let's get into the video. Daemon is the second son of Prince Baelon Targaryen and Princess Alyssa Targaryen. He's the younger brother to King Viserys, uncle and husband to Rhaenyra, the claimant queen, father to 5 children, though baby Visenya passed on prematurely. Daemon is a rogue prince, a great warrior, a dragon rider, and some would even say the epitome of what a Targaryen should be, though I'm not so sure. Above all else, Daemon is a mystery. No one really knows what he's thinking half the time, his goals and plans, but one thing is clear. Most of his thoughts are of blood and fire. When the show starts, it seems Daemon could easily be put in position as the show's main antagonist. He has all the qualities one would need. He's a younger brother overlooked by his family. He has an older brother who makes bad political decisions and lets others walk all over him, while he's a great warrior, hyper-aggressive and reveling in bloodshed. He has the loyalty of thousands in the city and the fear of even more. By law and precedent, he is the king's heir since Viserys has no living true-born sons. Then he's replaced by a girl half his age in a society where men are supposed to be prioritized. With his brutal acts and the criticism he receives on the daily, it seems as if Daemon is the main obstacle for our protagonist, at least within the first few episodes. Daemon is akin to a powder keg, and you never know what or when he'll be set off. But let's just see if we can't find out what makes Daemon tick. Daemon is an enigma. In the books, he's described as a hero to some and to others the blackest of villains. I feel no scene embodies this concept more than when the Gold Cloaks raid King's Landing. It's framed as Daemon delivering the king's justice to the criminals of the city, and he delights in bringing out such brutal punishments. But despite it being framed as him upholding the law, it tends to seem as if he's merely setting an example. During the scene, people are being grabbed on the streets, taken from their homes. It's frantic. People are having charges yelled at them, and no one seems to really know what's going on. It's chaos, and Daemon revels in such things. While these people are said to be criminals, I couldn't help but wonder if that was really true. We don't see anyone holding a list for the crimes. We don't hear names being called. It feels more like people are just being assigned crimes and giving the punishment accordingly. No one gets to plead their case to it either. They immediately lose a hand, other appendages, and even their heads. Normally, some of these people would be given the option to go to the wall. Castle Black and the Night's Watch should still be a thing here, but that doesn't happen. The truth of the matter is left up in the air, left ambiguous. Perhaps Daemon did do the king's justice and was just a tad overzealous about it. Or maybe, which I find more likely, is that Daemon didn't care who was guilty or not. It's just him setting an example and instilling fear into the people. And it does seem like that was the point. Perhaps with such a brutal display for all to witness, he aimed to discourage any real criminals from doing any more wrong, because this could easily be them losing life and limb. He tries to bring about order through discord. Daemon very much strikes me as a person who believes that the ends justify the means. It doesn't matter how dirty he has to get as long as he achieves the desired result. Of course, this causes some people to view him in a negative light. Otto even goes as far to call him a second Maegor if he should become king. Maegor Targaryen, also known as Maegor the Cruel, was the third Targaryen monarch of Westeros, and uncle to old King Jaehaerys. After his older brother Aenys died, he stole the throne from his nephew, Aegon the Uncrowned, with the help of his mother Visenya, the original rider of Vhagar and the wielder of Darksister, the sword Daemon wields now, which was also wielded by Maegor at one point. He was viewed as a true tyrant among the people, a ferocious warrior who was notorious for killing anyone who got in his way. He had no tolerance for those who rose against him, not the Faith, who rebuked Targaryen rule, or his own nephew, whose throne he stole. Still, despite his heinous actions, one could argue Maegor was a necessary evil. It was his heartless and cruel acts that made people truly fear the Targaryen line. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and this isn't a Maegor video. My point is the two of them are similar. Both were great warriors and dragon riders with older brothers who were otherwise incompetent rulers. But the difference is that Daemon actually loves his brother. It's easy to view Daemon as the typical second son, the gifted, self-entitled sibling who should have been king the entire time because he's such an alpha and his brother is stupid. But beyond whatever desires he has for power, Daemon truly has a love for his family. He cares for Rhaenyra, to the point where it becomes kind of creepy, but he cares, and he wants what's best for Viserys and his family, or at least what he believes is best. After the death of Balon, the king's son, Otto says that he called him the heir for a day, and once again we're put into a questioning situation, because we don't know if he actually said it. In the scene, every time Otto references Daemon, we switch between the two of them, but when you hear the heir for a day part, the scene stays solely on Otto. Viserys confronts Daemon, who looks stunned, before saying,
"We must all mourn in our own way, Your Grace."
If that's true, then that's an insensitive way to grieve. But there's multiple possibilities here. Maybe someone else said it, and Daemon took the fall. Or perhaps he did say it, but it was taken out of context. And as we see numerous times in the story, context is everything. Like when Otto says Daemon slept with Rhaenyra. He's relying on secondhand information. He didn't see it himself. And the spy who did it left before the whole scene played out. So how do we know the same thing didn't happen here? It's food for thought, but let's move on. During our confrontation, Daemon lashes out at Viserys saying that he should have been made hand.
Why would I do that?
Because I'm your brother.
And there's a lot of layers to this that I don't think people realize. It's not just him trying to get power or believing he's entitled to a position he hasn't earned. So to get the point across, I have to bring up a scene that I don't feel most people acknowledge. In this scene, Daemon can't finish and Mysaria reassures him, telling him how great and wonderful he is, just stroking his ego while she holds him. For all his brutality, bravado, and swagger, Daemon is insecure. It may sound hard to believe, but as I mentioned before on this channel, those who seem to have the most power are often the most vulnerable. Mysaria says he can't be replaced, and I don't think she merely means as the king's heir. Daemon kinda sums it up himself.
You ever tried to send me away to the Vale, to the City Watch, anywhere but by your side?
Daemon probably feels alienated by his brother, like in some twisted way he's not good enough, so he has to continue to prove himself. And when he doesn't get what he wants, he acts out. Daemon wants to be Hand of the King because that's the position closest to his brother. He wants Viserys to recognize him and acknowledge him, and it's crazy just how much of our main cast is driven by that. Aegon, who Viserys only ever ignored and ridiculed. Rhaenyra, whom he never truly saw until his obsession tore his family apart. Now Daemon, who just wants to be near and look after his big brother, but is constantly sent away and told he's unfit. Being Hand of the King and the potential heir is more than just having power. It's a symbol of their bond. But instead of choosing Daemon to be by his side, he chose Otto. And I would argue that's a reason as to why he holds him in such contempt. He's the king's brother, his blood, a Valyrian, yet he chose someone else to stand by his side. Daemon is insecure not just in his place of succession, but as a brother. He's the king's blood, and yet Viserys trusts someone who might as well be a stranger more than him. And it hurts. Daemon calls Otto
Loyal
A
hand.
cunt. A second son who stands to inherit nothing he doesn't seize for himself.
But I can't help but find that ironic because that's exactly who Daemon is. Daemon has nothing.
You have no allies at court but me!
He has no land, no titles. Sure, he's technically Lord of Runestone through Rhea Royce, but he's barely there and his opinion holds no true weight in the Vale, even as a prince. Even if he had children with Rhea, they would come before him in succession because he's married to her, not the other way around. Hell, I imagine that's the reason why he didn't like her that much either. He's the prince, and yet he's forced to play the role of a bride. Guess it sucks when the roles are reversed. Daemon has no real connections with anyone outside of his family. Sure, he has the City Watch, but they can all be replaced. Everywhere Daemon goes, doors seem to open, but what doors can Daemon close? What can he truly call his and his alone without it being given or taking it from somebody else?
No matter how fat the leech grows, it always wants for another meal.
It's amazing how Daemon digs into Otto as if he's the devil incarnate, and yet we never know why he hates him so much. Almost every time they interact, Daemon starts a conflict. In episode 1, he brings up Otto's dead wife, or episode 7 when Otto gives Aemon his condolences only for the prince to lash out. Sometimes it feels as if Daemon is just projecting and looking for a fight. He goes out of his way to make Otto seem so terrible for manipulating and exploiting his brother's naivety, But he does the exact same thing. Constantly, he undermines Viserys and forces him into compromising positions, then knowing his brother won't do anything to him, just waltzes back into his life. Yet, that's fine because he's his younger brother.
I will speak of my brother as I wish. You will not.
And sure, when you're family, you can get away with things that other people can't. Viserys makes that pretty clear with his brother and daughter. But the line has to be drawn somewhere. Daemon craves so much for his brother's approval that he puts people in danger just to be acknowledged. Like on Dragonstone, he threatens a war he doesn't even want, lies that Mysaria is pregnant, and steals the egg of the king's newly deceased son just to provoke a reaction and get Viserys to come to him. Then, when that fails, he goes across the sea to the Stepstones to force Viserys to acknowledge him in a different way. And when his brother offers help, he refuses. Daemon has to prove himself. Prove he doesn't need anyone to help, so when he comes back home again, no one can say he didn't earn his place there. And once he makes his way back home again, he immediately gets thrown out for allegedly sleeping with his niece. An accusation he doesn't even try to disprove, because he has a goal, and as I mentioned before, he'll do anything to achieve it, even if it's really selfish and dangerous. Daemon has shown little care for the opinions of others throughout the story, kind of like Rhaenyra does when she's younger. He has such a reverence for the Valyrians and the Targaryen lines that he views them as above the law.
Who gives a fuck what some lord thinks? You are the dragon. Your word is truth and law.
But as I mentioned in my Rhaenyra analysis, the opinion of the people is everything. And with this one ad, he's compromised the whole family. Because of him, people think Rhaenyra slept with her uncle. Because he warmed her up and left her to cool on her own, she saw comfort in a Kingsguard, putting them both in jeopardy. And that action draws a line in the family later on that's never erased and causes a war later on. Daemon's uncaring nature towards collateral damage translates well into his later years, though he tries to distance himself from it. He takes Laena Velaryon as a wife later on, following in his brother's footsteps of marrying children. Granted, she was hitting on him too, but the girl was only 15 years old at the time. After his whole incident with Rhaenyra and Rhea, Daemon looks as if he wants to take a step back from the throne. Every one of his schemes until now has blown up in his face, and for once, he doesn't want to risk being burned. At least, if you're not counting that dragon race he had with Laena some years later. He settles in Pentos and has 2 daughters, Baela and Rhaena, with a 3rd child on the way. Daemon tries to make it seem like he's left his rogue days behind him, but that's further from the truth. He still carries a typical Targaryen obsession with his bloodline, with old Valyria, and it still drives many of his actions whether he believes it or not, like with how he treats his children differently, teaching one Valyrian while leaving the other out to dry. I also can't help but notice the symbolism of his marriage with Laena. House Velaryon is tied to the sea, and Targaryens are tied to fire. When he's with her, it's like an act of him dampening his normal hot-blooded self. Then when he gets with Rhaenyra, that changes. Laena says,
Life has, I know, disappointed you. Perhaps I too am not the wife you would have wished for yourself.
Laena.
Acknowledging that his heart, if that resides somewhere else, she was more of a half measure to try and keep him in check. Then she has difficulty birthing their 3rd child, and Daemon is forced to make a similar choice to his brother Viserys. But unlike Viserys, he's not willing to take that risk and cut his wife open. But still, Laena dies and Daemon looks distraught about it. Whether he loved her or not, she was still the mother of his children. He undoubtedly cared for her, and once again we see a side of Daemon aside from violence and vanity. Though Daemon never seems to truly be able to express these emotions for long, not even to his kids, as he just walks away as they cry. Now, there is a deleted scene from the show where Daemon hugs his daughters after the death of Laena. People hate that it was removed, but I think for the direction they seem to be going with this character, it makes sense. Daemon only knows how to express himself, through violence. Sure, we have these tender moments between him, Viserys, Rhaenyra, and even Laena, but Daemon communicates best with fire and sword. It's why, despite his comfy life, he still looks withdrawn and unhappy because he needs to be in the thick of it, living up to the legacy he tries to ignore. At Laena's funeral, he seems kind of withdrawn, almost as if he doesn't know how to process what he's feeling. Then he laughs at Vaemon's speech about Velaryon blood, which if you ask me is just him trying to cope with his emotions. Later that night, he and Rhaenyra reconnect, and passion takes a hold. And I have to talk about this. Daemon and Rhaenyra is a widely supported ship in the fandom, and people love to talk about how they should have been married from the start and how in love they are, but this is a bad matchup if I have ever seen one. If you ask me, whatever love Rhaenyra feels for Daemon, more so comes from the lack of love she received from Viserys as a child.
Yes, I was a child. And look at what my life became without you.
Rhaenyra always felt overlooked by Viserys, even before Aegon was born. She always wanted his attention, to be the apple of his eye. But she wasn't. Like Daemon and Aegon, she sought his acknowledgement, and when it could not be found in her father, she found it in another. No matter what, Daemon seemed to always look after her, speaking with her in Valyrian like it's some secret love language, giving her gifts, and when she's 17, saying she's matured, acknowledging her like she wants. People like to call it romantic, but it's manipulation and grooming at its finest. Even with Daemon, it's messed up to think he watched this girl grow up, and then tries to sleep with her years later. While I have no doubt he desires Rhaenyra, I still don't think he actually loves her. He favored her as a kid, then left for 3 years, came back, tried to get in bed with her, then left for 10 years, and then came back again. This time, they do the deed and even get married, not even a day after his wife's funeral. Yet Aemon's the asshole for claiming a dragon there are no restrictions on, and not these two people who kill an innocent man, stage a fake murder, and traumatize their kids who barely have time to grieve. In a span of days, Rhaenyra's sons have lost 2 fathers, Laenor and Harwin, a man Rhaenyra claims to have trusted and even loved. Then Daemon's daughters, who just lost their mom and her dragon. Then they let Laenor's parents believe they murdered him for years and wonder why they don't like them. They want people to fear them and believe they're heartless people, so they'll think twice about standing against them. Daemon also uses fear tactics to keep the Kingsguard in control, so they don't rebel once Aegon has taken the throne.
Do you think honor keeps them in line? Do you think it's honor that's keeping the peace? It's fear. Fear and blood.
But fear will only get you so far. There were people in our world who held the fear of millions, and still people fought against them. You want people to fear you, but there are 2 sides to that coin. People fear you, so they serve you, or people fear serving you more than they fear fighting against you. Fear is a fine line that has to be balanced with love and respect. If the people love you enough, then maybe they'll fear losing it. Blood and fire isn't always the answer, but Daemon would say otherwise. Especially after Viserys' death. For all of his antics and their disagreements, Viserys is still Daemon's big brother. He loves him, admires him, and to see him as a literal husk of his former self is heartbreaking. You see it in the way he looks at him when he's bedridden, and when he helps him up to the throne. Then, when he dies, he just can't seem to accept it.
That whore of a queen murdered my brother and stole his throne, and you could have burnt more for it.
Granted, Viserys dying, then them immediately crowning Aegon when he continues supporting Rhaenyra is very fishy, but Daemon should know his brother was on his last legs. He could have died any day. Hell, he was lucky he didn't fall over on those swords when he was walking up to the throne. What I think this is, though, is that Daemon needs someone to blame, someone to hate, someone to burn. And it's easy for that to be the people he never liked to begin with. All he needed was an excuse, and his brother's death was the perfect one. When Rhaenyra considers peace with the Greens, he lashes out, saying they've already declared war. And if you ask me, that's a tricky thing. No blood has been drawn, and yet he's so eager to rush off to battle, no matter the collateral cost. He wants to use these dragons that have never been tamed, never been to war, and some who are little more than hatchlings, to get what he believes is theirs. For him, peace will never be an option, and when Rhaenyra mentions the prophecy to sway him, he chokes her.
My brother was a slave to his omens and portents. Anything to make his feckless reign appear to have purpose. Dreams didn't make us kings. Dragons did.
But little does he realize he's been a slave too this entire time. A slave to his urges, to power, to dragons. He disapproves of Viserys, but he and his brother are more alike than they know. This idolization of the Targaryen lineage, of old Valyria, that deludes them into thinking they're more than what they are, and causes them to make decisions that get them into compromising situations.
The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion.
An illusion Daemon has no hope of freeing himself of. He's not built for peace, that much was clear in Pentos. Even then, his legacy calls to him. Like a moth to a flame, he keeps flying closer and closer, and one has to wonder, will he burn?